Wine Fringe.
Welcome back to Wine Fringe, episode 2. Today we're talking about natural wine versus conventional wine and what is the difference. My name is Jill Smedley and I'm here with
Jake Bottinger.
and we're going to dive into today's topic. But first, before we begin, we're going to talk about the wine that we're drinking. Jake.
All right, so I picked this out specially for you, Jill. It's Naomi Red Blend.
Because you know I love the California blends.
Oh yeah, love California. And I know how much you love them. So, Naomi, I think we all know this. If you've made it to episode 2, you've probably heard of it. And hopefully you've at least tasted it one time. So the reason we selected this wine is I think it's kind of the shining example for this topic. So we're going to go into chemicals in the vineyard and chemicals in the cellar, the differences between natural winemaking or more organic styles of winemaking, and then conventional winemaking, and then what it's become today. And so Naomi's entire brand is the example of conventional winemaking. I've mentioned they have teams of scientists and enologists and lab techs where they're constructing wine on a chemical level and making it taste consistently from year to year.
Okay. Now what do you think of the wine on the nose and
All
on
right.
the palate?
So I don't want to dig at California.
I smell brown sugar.
I smell brown sugar, which would be an indication of over extraction. I got a little oak on the nose, like fresh, clean, like barrel. Like so, when you're listening to this and you're hearing us talk about barrels, like when I say barrel and that barrel pops into your head, that's literally what this smells like.
There's an herb I can't place.
It's probably like dill.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good dill. All right, Jill.
The
Save your
texture
face.
of the wine is something I struggle to get past. It's very velvety.
Yeah, it's really, really flat. There's no acid to this wine.
It's borderline syrupy in my mouth.
Yeah, it's cooked. So what I would say is it's cooked down is what it comes across. Like you've gone
Like
from
stewed
having
fruit.
well, not quite stewed fruit, but like stewed fruit.
Mulled
yeah,
wine.
Okay, you're right. Yeah, it's flabby. It's sweet.
Can you describe what flabby is for our listeners here?
Okay, so you've got acidic. You might hear people say it's bright. It's laser focused. It's sharp. It's got an edge to it. Those are acidic terms. And then you would hear the alternative to that, or the antithesis of that, which would be it's flabby. It's water-like. It's kind of milky on the palate.
That's a good word for, yeah.
Velvety. And that we're just referring to the actual acid levels. This is not, this drinks like water.
I don't think so. I mean, just from the sugar content.
Well, like the body of it is just like it's so smooth. There's tannin on it.
There's a medicinal quality to it as
There's
well.
a medicinal quality to it. It's got some blackberry. It's got some jammy notes. Brown sugar, molasses.
I get like a maraschino cherry kind
Yeah,
of
I
vibe.
like that maraschino cherry. Yeah, okay. This is fine. I can taste the barrel even now. This at the very least would need something to go with it. So I
Chocolate cake. That's all I can think of.
Okay.
Just pairing sugar with more sugar.
So I remember trying Naomi back in like 2017 and 18 for the first time. And so it was different back then. And I remember having Naomi prior to 2015 and going, wow, this is a pretty nice wine. And then Naomi was purchased by Constellation. And they became owned, and now they're their own Naomi Wines brand. But they got purchased as a brand, and then it became the same wine every year after that. And so, you know me, I don't like it when the man comes in and takes over the brand. So they purchased this winery, and it was pretty decent before then. And then they purchased it because a lot of consumers were starting to buy it. and they made it the same wine every year. And you can't manipulate a wine like that without like changing it.
Yeah, because the environment changes year over year.
Right.
So that's going to impact the flavor of the grapes and the
Right.
flavor of the wine.
And when I say they purchased the brand, they didn't purchase the winery. They purchased just the Meiomi brand and the styles of wine that brand was associated
So you're not
with.
even using the grapes from that
Not even
facility.
using the grapes from that facility. So this is fine. If you drink this at home, that's fine. Please don't pay what I paid today, which was $30. I just slipped by the grocery store on my way over. And I was shocked because I remember paying $20 a bottle, and now it's $30 a bottle. Yeah, Meiomi red wine.
So this is, you said conventional wine. So let's talk about conventional winemaking practices.
Right. So, well, let's back up. So where did wine come from, right? You know, it was assumed that there was some kind of wizard in your tribe that had a stick, and he would bless the harvest and all of the fruits and vegetables or fruits and spices inside of a pot, and he would take his stick and he would dip it down into the thing, and you know, after a few days, the wizard would come out and say wine. Right?
There's
and that's
natural yeast on the...
Right. Very good. See?
I remember. See, I do listen.
Bing. So that's kind of where the wizard concept comes from, and the stick. We always see wizards associated with the staff or a stick. That's kind of where that comes from, in mead and then wine and all these other things. Like that's I would say ancestral winemaking.
Okay.
Okay, and then we have traditional winemaking. So think more like old world. Like we've got a French winemaker. We've got all the village people working together in the vineyards making wine, right? And then we have the New World wine. And this is what I would call conventional wine. It's like we've cracked the code on winemaking. So you do these things in the vineyard. You pick these grapes at this point. You use these products. Wine.
We'll talk about what I'm about to say a little bit later on in our Neo-Prohibition episode. Yeah. But, we've been drinking wine for thousands of years. It's been 8,000 years that humanity has had wine.
Right.
And we talk about how, there's discussions that wine causes cancer. And you and I keep coming back to, it's been consumed for this many, thousands of years. People have lived to be 100. People have lived longer historically. If the wine didn't, what changed? And it's the science. And what you're saying is basically that this conventional wine, they've taken the science and really drilled down on how to make a consistent product, so it's heavily manipulated.
Right. Well, we all know that wine varies vintage to vintage. That's why the most expensive wines in the world are usually like, oh, I have this 1986.
It's unique.
Yeah. Or this 2000 champagne. Or I know like right now, I just saw this the other day, Chateauneuf du Pape from 1990 is like considered a really hot vintage, and they're going for lots of dollars because the vintage was really good for growing grapes and making wine that year. And so wine is vintage based, right? Which means it's not going to be good every year. No matter how great your marketing is, every year, Jill, I don't always make great wines.
I disagree. I think a great winemaker can make a good wine
every year.
Every year.
Yeah. And I think, I would agree with that. I think if you're good at what you do, and you have an understanding of the growing season and the vintage and your climate and your site and, all the factors, you can, surmise that into a drinkable bottle of wine.
I mean, I think the artist in you is coming out a little bit that I have bad vintages. You perceive them potentially as bad vintages.
That's because I know the secrets.
Okay, well, the consumer doesn't need to know those secrets.
Well, the consumer does need to know
I'm just kidding.
So, and you can argue now that this Meiomi, it says 2022. Mm-hmm. Like, clearly the vintages are always good. I know Meiomi, it's good every year.
Just because it has a number on it doesn't mean that it hasn't been altered.
Right. And only 85% of this wine has to come from that vintage. So, and Meiomi is it's a giant winery. It's not even like a chateau out in the country surrounded by vineyard. It's a factory for wine.
Yeah.
So they have, 10,000 gallon tanks, 20,000 gallon tanks, and their winemakers look like construction workers. They wear blue jeans and, boots and
the neon
orange
vests.
vests, yeah, and the hard hats, like,
Yeah.
and they're wearing work gloves, and they're all OSHA certified with clipboards. Like, that's the level of wine producing we're talking about now.
The art is taken out of it, and the science is taken over.
Well, I mean, there's some art to it, right? We love the idea of it.
Yeah.
The art's on the label and the marketing. It's the art.
I mean, we have a bear with a star. What's that? California's what goes on their flag,
Careful,
right?
you'll upset them.
Well, I mean, you're trying to represent California. Cool. You're proud of your state. But other than that, the label is boring.
Well, I think for a general consumer, this is kind of what they're expecting a premium wine to look like, right?
No, honestly.
Oh, okay.
I think a lot of premium labels premium wines have developed labels that are with the times. That still have that premium feeling.
Well, I know that the general consensus is that price point in a grocery store setting is $20 or more.
Okay, yeah. But if I'm... And this is just me, because I come back to this all the time, and I tell you, I buy wine partially for the label. Because
Right.
I think that you should have a good wine and good marketing to make a great wine.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I'm glad you agree. So glad. The shape of the label, which is a rectangle with the corners basically cut off. Mm-hmm. It looks like a stretched out stop sign.
Okay. It is.
And
Or maybe it's a ticket to happiness in a bottle.
a ticket to happiness. All right, you asked me to evaluate it. I think it's boring, and I think general consumers will think this is boring. Now, with it being a higher price point, people might perceive it to be a finer wine.
Well,
However, I'm not going to gravitate towards this because this, you guys can't see it, but you'll see it in the picture on our Instagram and our Facebook. But the capsule on the top,
screw cap.
has red blend in a gold strip around it.
Yeah.
That looks very cartoonish to me. That cheapens the appearance of the bottle.
Well, remember, this was purchased at a grocery store. And
Regardless, it's a $30 bottle of wine.
I remember when Naomi was under a cork and capsule.
You always say screw caps
I love screw caps.
do not make poor wines, and people often perceive screw caps as a lesser wine. And you argue that there are fine wines under screw caps. Do not say screw caps.
No. My point was that I remember when this was under a cork and capsule, and now it's a screw cap. What does that tell you, marketing person?
Well, marketing person, it doesn't lay down.
It doesn't lay down. I think that's good, and I also think that people are buying this, and it's not that they're laying it down and then they're opening it back up and it's not very good anymore. I think that it recognizes the idea that 95% of all wine is consumed within the first 24 hours. This to me is like, if you don't know anything about wine, or maybe you have a bottle once in a while, you're going to buy something like this and not have to spend 15 minutes looking for your corkscrew at home. And that this is that kind of that call out, because screw caps are the new fad. They're cheaper to put on a bottle. Consumers are definitely more comfortable with them now at this point. Like, the overall package on this, to me, screams traditional, like, fancy schmancy wine. But I make wine, so I don't know. You grow it. You produce it, you market it.
I market it. I do not grow it, nor do I produce it. Clearly, because if we dive into any of these,
for a day.
No, we should not. The building would literally explode.
Our socials would be horrible.
I'm sure you'd figure it out. My job is not hard at all.
So, all right.
You always say, I grow grapes and make wine.
That's what I do.
I take pictures and, make reels. But that's really not all I do. But
You play on your phone all day, Jill.
oh my gosh, that's the running joke, that I play on my phone all day. Do you know how many times I have to listen to the same audio file when I make a reel? It's maddening.
I'll be more entertaining next time.
I feel like a DJ, but a really bad one.
So you're not impressed with their label and their marketing, and
To me, a fine wine label would be like a Linden or an RDV.
well, for sure. I mean, you've got to spend a lot more time on presentation when you're a boutique winery.
Fair. But if you're trying to sell a high-end premier label and you have all this money and you have a small winery that's doing a better job than you, you're doing something wrong.
Do you think the label is premium enough in the grocery store setting to be recognized as a premium wine?
I think with current graphic trends, it's going to be edged out quickly.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take that bet. Listeners, remember she said this. We'll follow back at the end of the season, see if it's true.
Hey, I haven't led you too astray so far.
You have not been wrong much. What would you do to clean up the label? Make your pitch to Miyomi. This could be your...
I would blow up no, not blow up, like, but like... I would have the bear be larger and it'd be like just half the chest on the side of the label.
Oh yeah, makes sense.
And then it'd be more dramatic, and then I would almost have there be a foil layering with the fur. So it'd be two-toned.
Yeah, that would work.
And then I know the Miyomi font is their font. Mm-hmm. So you can keep that on there. But the red blend and the California text, those are, by the way, the subtext and the tertiary text.
Right.
So those I would change up to make them look a little bit more elevated. Right now, this is like your standard like computer font that's as bland as you possibly can have. And you can dress this up.
What about the back label?
It's busy.
I need my glasses in order to read.
Yeah, exactly. That font is far too tiny. There's too many words. And no one is going to turn your bottle around and read the Gettysburg Address. I'm sorry.
It's pretty long.
They shrunk the text down to half the size of the government warning. To me, those look like lines from here. And yeah, I'm 30, but I'm part of your primary demographic.
It's an evocative and memorable blend.
It's definitely memorable.
So, I think, okay, so we can improve the marketing, all right? Can we improve the winemaking and the grape growing? Can they make it
drier red?
Can they make it a drier red? So, we don't know the truth. This is just an article that this is a thing that I have been following for a little bit now. But there is a winemaker, and I'm not going to name him because we don't know him. And also I don't want to get him into more hot water. But he makes a wine called Dial Tone. And he had it placed in a beverage shop. And his entire marketing poster, it says, this, and it's just a single bottle it's a single bottle of Miyomi in the ad, and then a whole bunch of 32 bottles of his wine next to it, and it says, there is less sugar in 32 bottles of Dial Tone Pinot Noir than in just one bottle of Miyomi Pinot Noir. And it didn't take long for Constellation Brands to immediately send a cease and desist, and where he got those facts, he's not saying anything true, blah, blah, blah. And apparently the winemaker had the wine lab tested and proved that his wine has 0.4 grams per liter of sugar, whereas Miyomi's Pinot Noir had 18.3 grams per liter of sugar. So that's the part I think that astonished me, was that he is taking on one of the 5 major producers in the country.
One of the things I really wish that was on a back label was the residual sugar.
Right. Now we're getting into that conversation about back labels.
Yeah, transparency. But keep going. On that note of how much sugar is there, I really wish that there was a residual sugar note. Because we have it on our notes for our tasting room staff. Sure. We don't have it on our bottle because it's not required.
Right.
But I would love to see residual sugar on bottles going forward.
This kind of plays into the idea of like ingredients list on back labels, nutritional facts on back labels. Mm-hmm. Do consumers care?
I think we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, and it comes down to a frequency of consumption. And if that consumer really wants to be somewhat educated and they're going to wineries, twice a month to 3 times a month, I think that consumer cares. But because of the growing movement of like low no, you're not going to see them care necessarily as much because they're looking for the alternative to alcohol.
Okay. And here's a thought. Did you ever think of Miyomi as a sweet wine or a dry wine?
I've never had it before.
Oh, okay. Well,
this is the first time.
I'm sorry, I ruined this for you. I always thought
I'm glad I didn't buy it.
Yeah. I always thought of this as a dry red wine. And I thought it was kind of the staple example of California wines. Mm-hmm. If they had put the residual sugar on this wine and I had seen it, I wouldn't have bought it.
Yeah.
And so I know in the last episode there was some commentary about the sweet wine drinker demographic decreasing. Mm-hmm. But then you taste this and this is a mass-produced, largely sold wine, is it actually decreasing?
But it almost hides it with the marketing because you see red blend, you see this label. Well, you and I disagree on how it's perceived from, premium, not premium, whatever. This looks like a bold red label where I will assume it's dry.
Correct.
This does not look like a sweet label to me.
So, and that's the point of this article is, this winemaker, and you guys can, I'm not going to name the winemaker because I don't know him, but I highly recommend, this was a 5-second Google search. It was Mayomi lawsuit, and it popped right up, San Francisco Chronicle. I'll let you do the rest of the work. But this guy kind of, and I don't know if he was just poking fun at the bear. Get it? Yeah, thank you. So
The dad jokes.
I don't know if he was poking fun to poke fun or he was really trying to take on the industry. I think it's very rock and roll. I would almost be brazen enough to do something like that. Then again, here we are talking about this article. I'm not saying it's true or not. This is just an article that I've read that I've been following. There's been very little headway made since he was sent the don't do that, don't talk about that,
we know
you can't prove.
Yeah.
And then he fired back with two facts. I had your wine tested. It's not false advertising, which is great marketing on his part because he's being open about
he
this.
ran a smear campaign with a big winery, right? It's brazen. And, he had their bottle on the picture and called them out by name.
Right.
And then could retaliate and say, I have the facts. That's insane.
Are you allowed to use somebody else's product in your advertisement?
I forget what the legality of that is.
Because that's the only thing that if the facts are facts, right? If this is all true, then he's not saying that anything that's not true. So it wouldn't fall into the slander libel thing, right?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Again, I'd have to be looking at it.
But this is kind of
I personally have never run a smear campaign, so I don't know the intricacies behind the scenes that would make it legal.
Right. Well, I don't know how he'll get away with that, but I'm not a lawyer for good reason. I know that this all ended, though. The last thing in this article is essentially he fires back to Constellation Brands, essentially saying, I think you're saying that I should keep making truthful statements about Mayomi. Thanks for that. Like most people these days, I care about how much sugar I ingest. And I think that's a larger takeaway from this is unintentionally this guy may have started a fight with a large producer, but he pointed out something that's on all of our minds, which is, sweet wines.
I feel like we need to have him on the podcast. He did something very fringe.
I think we can, let's do it. Let's find him. All right, we'll put that in the thing. If you have tried this wine, please let us know your thoughts.
Yeah. So we talked about the winemaking. What about vineyard practices?
Okay, so that's great. This is a red blend. I know for a fact, this is not, you guys can look this up on Wine Business Monthly and you'll start to see articles about these topics. There are thousands, tens of thousands of vineyards in California. They are all not premium grape growing vineyards, right? They are heavily doused in chemicals, Roundup, the highest end synthetics, things that nobody can pronounce, and they're just air doused or drone doused or tractor doused. And it's vineyards for miles and miles. So they put somebody in a tractor and he drives for miles dousing his vineyard in chemicals because these are the lowest quality standards expected for grapes for wines like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So just imagine miles and miles of grapes, like cornfields, but with vines, and just somebody bumping along, spraying all the grapes, and then they don't care about the Brix, the pH, the sugar. They're looking for a particular ripeness level established by a conglomeration of enologists and viticulturalists to go, okay, it's ready to pick, bring it in. Those vineyards are all across California, and they even buy high-end fruit that doesn't sell. They'll send a broker in, and that broker will make a deal and go, what's your bottom dollar? We'll take everything you have. And so this is an amalgamation of grapes. There could even be white grapes in this. There could be Chardonnay, there could be Sauv Blanc, Pinot Gris, Sangiovese, Cab Franc, Merlot, Malbec, Zinfandel, because it says red blend, and because of that, we don't have to list the grapes.
Any red blend that I'm buying, I'm looking for what it contains on the back.
I like to have fun. I like the
mystery?
This is the Wonder Egg of wines. Were you Wonder Ball? Were you there for Wonder Ball?
No.
The little chocolate ball that had the toy inside?
That's a little before my time.
Okay, well, thanks for making me feel old.
You made me feel young, so payback.
So, yeah, I don't know what the variety is. And they probably don't even care what the blend percentages are because they have these chemicals and these compounds, and they figured out what the best example of Meiomi red blend tasted like. Mm-hmm. And they deconstructed that molecularly and figured all those compounds out and then blended them all back.
Could this wine, saying red blend, have something other than wine grapes in it?
Absolutely.
Like, could it have stewed fruit? Could it have a different type of fruit wine in it?
As far as I know, it has to be, it doesn't say grape wine. I believe it's okay for it to have other things. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. I would say it's most likely just grapes. It's cheaper to buy grapes at this point than,
other fruits,
bananas
and stuff,
or mangoes. But it could have red wine and white wine in it, right? It's a red blend, but there could be a percentage of white in here, and it's still a very vibrant red wine, and that's because they're using mega purple, which is the chemical, and it's food coloring. That sweet red food coloring. They don't have to list that. And that has been linked to cancer causing effects. But we don't hear about this, right? Most consumers don't talk about that. So conventional winemaking, as we know it today, is to follow the recipe. And if you're a big company, you hire a team of people to make sure that your product tastes the same every single year. And then you just have to get volume. They could have even added water to this.
The alcohol, those were called, what are they called?
Jesus units.
Jesus units.
Yes, Jesus units, where we turn
water into
wine in the cellar. So you add water to wine generally to lower alcohol, and that's just dilution, right? It's banned in winemaking. You're not really supposed to do that unless you have a good reason. California, I believe, and other states might allow it, but I know California specifically is allowed to add Jesus units all day long. And so maybe they just let all the grapes hang until the very end of harvest where they're like 30 bricks and they're going to produce 15% alcohol, and they come in with the broker, offer a low price, buy everything up, turn it into this, realize consumers don't actually like dry wines, and then add just enough sugar. I mean, they're doing paneling with consumers to figure out what they like. They're having people taste these wines over and over again, and they're taking the demographic and going, these people will buy this if we make it this way. And then they replicate it every year.
Now the question becomes, should we stay clear of conventional wines or just ask the right questions about conventional wines?
So I think conventional wines, I like that term because it's the idea of like traditional winemaking, but it's not anymore because of these big corporations. So we'll call anything you buy at the grocery store, your basic grocery stores with a wine selection, conventional wines. If you go to a bottle shop or if you go to a restaurant and maybe a premium specialized grocery store, you're probably going to find traditional wines where it's maybe a specific producer from a specific place. And they may not be using all of these tricks of the trade that we don't talk about and we're not supposed to talk about.
But here we are on Wine Fringe.
We can do that when we're not affiliated with anybody.
Woohoo!
Unless you wanna affiliate with us. It's crickets. So I would call this traditional winemaking. That's going to be your bottle shops, your restaurants, and your local restaurants, not your Olive Garden and your Applebee's. They're going to buy the grocery store stuff.
This is the one with the chef who has to craft the menu.
Right. This would be more of a local owned, even possibly a locally owned chain.
Yes.
I would call that traditional winemaking. That's going to be your local wineries as well. And I think that's what you're trying to drive home. So I know that we're a local winery. I don't use any super crazy products. I've stripped almost all of that out of the winemaking with the exception of like a few fining agents.
But even your fining agents are more natural.
Yes. So so before we dive too far into this, right? So, what do I use in the vineyard? I try to use as many things that come from the earth directly. So, sulfur, I know I said the S word, There's another one called Manzate. I use bacteria. That's a fairly new technology that they've kind of finally mastered, where you basically put out bacteria into your vineyard that eat the disease.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So, and it is organic product. I'm mostly focused on maintaining the vine's immunity system through the care of the soil and the land itself. I find that if you remove dead trees and you keep your tree lines clear and you're feeding your soils and feeding your vines, everything is happy. You're going to have more bees in the vineyard. If I see bees and I see spiders and I see caterpillars and butterflies, like that's what I want. That's what you want to see. When you imagine a vineyard, you see these kinds of like, that biome, that biology going on, right? That's so cool. That's how we're picturing it. But if you're seeing scorched earth, completely exposed dirt underneath the vine, the grass is this weird shade of light green, yellow, and the vines are kind of this light yellow, greenish character, they're probably using synthetic chemicals.
Now, are you seeing those beneficial, like those great results with both vinifera and natives?
Yeah. So across the board, I've seen a ton of luck and promise with this. And that's just the idea of like, not that Chrysalis was ever doing anything wrong. We've always been conscientious, but just want to push the limits on how far we can go before it actually denigrates the quality. Kind of testing like, do I actually need these things? Or are we just being told that? And I, of course, believe the conspiracy that we're just being fed these things. And so I'll say that I sit traditional winemaking at Chrysalis Vineyards, where I'm trying to only use absolutely what it takes. So in the vineyard, I'm using absolutely what it takes, but we get 44 inches of rain per year. We had single degree digit weather for a week in Virginia. That's unusual for us. We had a drought last year for the third year in a row. Those are actual weather conditions that the East Coast isn't generally prepared for. Like I can talk about more diseases on the East. I can talk about more disease in the vineyard than probably most California winemakers working for Meiomi, because I've actually dealt with them and they've just read about it in a textbook. So sorry, California winemakers. There are some great ones that would know what I would be talking about. But like things like Pierce's disease, many of them probably will have never heard of that. Downy powdery black rot, that's the big three here.
I've never heard you mention that.
That's because we don't have those problems.
Okay, well, but you typically...
Bing!
Knock on some wood, why don't you?
No, I'm confident. One of the other chemicals that I use that I love, when we talk about herbicide, right? So I've eliminated glyphosate, right? We use... I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's essentially derived from a walnut tree's root. And it's just a natural herbicide. And it's a contact killer. You spray it. And once you kill the initial break of weeds at the beginning of the spring, you can manage it with weed eaters. And once you manage it enough, it won't grow more than 6 inches, 8 inches.
I didn't realize that's what you were doing.
And so that's why, we still do some touch-ups, right? We still want the vineyard to look presentable. Or, we get the occasional giant Johnson grass in the middle of the vineyard that somebody overlooks, and we weed eat that. But we're not spraying. We do 2 herbicide sprays a year now, and it's with an organic herbicide. We're doing a lot of soil management and a lot of nutrient management. But once you start to correct these things and you start to take this more traditional, holistic, organic kind of approach, like you'll find that your entire biome starts to balance itself.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I've kind of gone on a rant, sorry.
No, but this is something you're passionate about. So
one of my favorite topics. So that's the vineyard. That's what we do in the vineyard, right?
Okay, we got conventional wine. We have more of the traditional winemaking with a sustainable, conscious vineyard management and cellar practices.
So what's the big things in the cellars and chemicals that you know about?
Let's see. Big things in the cellar that I know about. You talked about Omega Purple, but we're not allowed to use that here.
Well, we don't use that here, and I would put my foot down on that with any producer that uses that here in Virginia or even on the East Coast. You don't need that. There are other methods.
It was not necessarily... Would it be considered a chemical to say microplastics as a fining agent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's this chemical called PVPP, which is polyvinyl propyl blah, 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 blah. And it's just microplastics. You add it to white wines and rosés to take out browning. and also protect against oxygen. And you add it, and then 10 days later, it falls out of solution. You filter the wine, and it's eliminated. So we don't use that anymore. I know that's an industry standard, so lots of people use it because lots of people don't realize that there's an alternative to it now. We use pea protein now, and general vegetable protein. That does the same thing as the microplastics. So why would we even bother using the microplastics? Well, the concern used to be that these alternatives were way more expensive, which is why they got lumped into that organic side of things. Now the prices have been cut in half. There's a huge interest in it. And, we switched over almost immediately. And I've run side-by-side tests and comparisons. You can't taste it. It does the exact same thing. The only difference is one's made from peas and the other is microplastics.
Talk about additions sometimes, like acid additions and tannin additions. So I would imagine that there would be a more chemical way to approach that and a more natural way to approach that.
Well, okay, so the 3 most common grape acids you'll find in grapes, right, is malic, and there's actually only 2. There's 3 that are used in the industry primarily.
Malic, lactic.
So there's, so I guess there are 3, 4. There's malic and tartaric. That's naturally occurring in grapes, right? And then there's citric, right? Citric does not come from grapes. And then there's, like you've said, lactic acid, which comes from bacteria. You can add you can add all 4 of those to wine. And sometimes you got to make an acid adjustment. There are a number of reasons. You need to adjust the pH up or down. You need to help stabilize against microbial spoilage. Maybe you just want a little bit more acid because your Viognier is flabby or your Albarino is just off a little bit. So you can add acid. And you do this typically by adding some kind of acid. A lot of winemakers get lazy and they just add citric because they think the consumer can't tell the difference.
Can you?
I can absolutely tell the difference. And you see a lot of citric additions in wines when you're tasting winemakers that have been doing it for 30 years, because 30 years ago it was a lot harder and more expensive to get your hands on the malic and the tartaric. So when
They're also the cowboys of
winemaking I'm
back
not
then,
knocking them.
because less was available to them from a knowledge base. And products as
technology,
well.
Yeah. Technology was completely different then. And that's where I'm lucky to be in the wine industry now, at a point where I had kind of been wondering about these things, learning it, but now you're seeing consumers asking about it, which is really cool. Keep pestering your producers about what they use in their wines.
We need ingredient labels required.
I personally am for ingredient labels. I just don't know that there's enough space on the back of a wine label. Would a QR code be a great way for, would you click a QR code for an ingredients list?
100%. We tested this theory with a wine that you and I worked, I worked on the marketing component, you made the wine. And we worked
on it together.
Sure, I tasted it on occasion when I came to the cellar.
Sure.
But
I told you I wanted to put the ingredients list on the back.
You said you wanted to put the ingredients list, and then you said you wanted to put a QR code.
Right, and you scrunched up with anger.
Partially because I knew how much I wanted to do from a marketing standpoint without the addition of adding a video and a landing page and all this stuff. And we were in the height of, we were running a wine tour at the time. Yeah. On top of that, that's what the cringe was. Any other time you would have asked me to do this, I would have jumped on it. And I still got it done. Anyway, so an ingredients label I would totally have on a QR code. Via a QR code.
Right.
I think that would be completely acceptable, because a lot of these wines are going to have a lot more than just the 3 ingredients that was in the wine we worked on.
Yeah, that was intentional, right? So we were making Norton Nouveau, which is in the style of Beaujolais Nouveau. And I really wanted to make sure that it was yeast, nutrients, and the Norton grapes. And that was the whole thing, was just getting people to try Norton for the first time at a certain opportunity. That's all this was about. Because I knew that wine would be a hit, and I knew that if you could do the marketing for it, it would blast off the shelf. And that was the whole thing. The whole concept was just I like this style. You like to make things look pretty. Let's do this.
Thanks.
And you made it look pretty because It's Norton, and Norton's a challenging name to sell to new consumers.
When you put flowers on it, I think it's a little bit easier.
You did really good with the wildflower.
Thank you.
But the QR code was cool, right?
The QR code was cool and it was successful. I think with these wineries that have more ingredients in it, it's also kind of an out.
Yeah.
As well. So if labels become a requirement and ingredients lists become a requirement, not everybody is going to scan that QR code. So while maybe that movement, that legislation will come through, the ramifications of having more ingredients might not be immediate.
Right. I hope that it challenges winemakers to use less. And that's what I would really like. I'd like to see this come back from conventional winemaking, because there are winemakers here in Virginia that are very much like, you buy everything in the catalogs that they send you right before harvest. You buy it all and you use it all. Mm-hmm. And that happens. That's a thing, right? But if you're going to make your own cookies at home, like, you really don't need all of the ingredients found in a bag of Oreos. You don't.
No. So
that's where we're talking. That's what we're actually talking about here, is like, you can buy Oreos at the grocery store, or we can make our own at home. And that would be traditional. And in the cellar, we use things like, in the past, they used bull's blood to take out tannin and fine wine. They used pig gelatin, which still can be used today, which does not sound great, and it's not fun to work with. It's just like playing with fat from a pig. Yeah, you're cringing. Nobody can see you, but you're cringing. We also use bentonite. And so bentonite is clay. It's found in foundation that women use in makeup. It's kitty litter. Mm-hmm. That's what a bag of kitty litter is. It's just bentonite. And we extract it from the earth. We grind it up into granular powder, mm-hmm. and we mix it up. It swells into mud. We dump it into the white wine, and it strips out the proteins in wine and keeps it from becoming hazy, because most consumers don't like hazy wines, which I think they're okay with now. And then we use milk and eggs, and not the yolks, just the whites. And, these are known for reducing browning or smoothing out a wine. And then the last one is isinglass, which comes from a sturgeon's swim bladder. And that makes all of the other chemicals work better, but it also helps the fining and the filtration altogether just work better. It has some other cool characters. And those would, with the exception of pig gelatin and PVPP maybe, and bull's blood, I use all of those, the others, the bentonite, the casein, the albumin. I use those types of things. I don't use the PVPP anymore. And I think it helps with the wines. I'd love to get to where we're never using those.
Yeah.
So.
All right, now is a perfect segue, since we talked about conventional, traditional, and low intervention, mm-hmm. to transition to natural wines.
Right. So you bought this. It's your wine.
But
try not to fangirl too much.
I'm trying not to fangirl because I really do love this winery. So we got a wine from Arterra Wines. They're located in Delaplane, Virginia. I can never pronounce the name at the bottom of this. Do you know how to pronounce it?
Bayukababa.
Bayukababa. It's a Norton wine that is aged in amphora.
Yep. And
Jason does, I don't want to say natural winemaking practices, because it really is truly more organic.
I think he's walking that tightrope.
He is walking that tightrope. Like, I think he wants to be organic. That's his intention.
I asked him this question once, and he gave me this very poetic answer about...
He always does.
He's just trying to make really great wine that showcases his site. I can't tell what he means by that, if he's trying to be organic or if he's trying to be natural. I think he's just trying to make wine that people love and appreciate. So I know that Jason did this native fermented in a clay amphora. I've seen the clay amphora. He takes very good care of it. And he made a fantastic Norton. Of all the things to do with Norton that you can and should do with Norton, or would do with Norton, I did not expect the clay amphora.
It's so good.
It is. And I know that Jason is driving towards organic, but he's struggling to grow grapes in a place that don't necessarily love organic. He's very much about the soils. His site is very specific. It's very rocky. There's lots of space for the. It's so rocky that all of his vines have to grow down into further depths of the soil. He works his vineyard. He's all about his canopy. He sprays organic chemicals. And the big one that we all use is called oxidate, and it's essentially just hydrogen peroxide. And it's just a high concentration of it. You spray it on the vines, it kills everything. And you can touch the vines like an hour later. I think that's the re-entry. You could almost lick it off the vines and be completely safe.
Okay.
Don't lick chemicals. So I think this is a great expression. Break it down, Jill.
It's not blackberry, I'm smelling. It's plum.
I would agree with that.
Gosh, you can smell that amphora. How would you describe the smell of an amphora, though? That it imparts on it.
So amphoras are weird, right? So they're clay pots, right? And when I say clay pots, you're probably picturing something that's like a foot or two tall. What it really is it's something that's like 3 to 5 feet tall. They can be all kinds of shapes and sizes. They're an unusual vessel because they allow the exchange of oxygen. So they allow oxygen in and out. So there's this breathing, and through that breathing, there's this convection movement of based on the shape of the vessel itself and the oxygen movement, and that stirs the wine.
That's insane because oxygen is normally the villain in the cellar.
Right, and I think I always talk about with everybody like oxidative winemaking versus reductive winemaking, and now I'm at the school of like you got to use both. You got to know when to use both, and Jason Murray isn't even concerned about that in the same way that I am. He's transcended the two schools of thought, and he's gone on to like what makes the best wine. And it's not even about what is and what isn't. So I get almost like this nice smoke nose to it, like campfire smoke, which I really like. Now, I know that he did add a little bit of sulfur to this, and he keeps his sulfurs, when he uses sulfur, I think he said less than 4 parts per million. And why that's wild is because like our wines, I never exceed more than 40, and I'll put the whites in at 20, and I'll put the reds in at 40. So like that's where I'm at. So he's way below me. I'm 10 times higher than him. So his wines are very honest expressions. It's got sort of this campfire nose, blueberry.
Get a little bit of like white pepper in there.
Oh yeah, there's a little bit of white pepper. And the mouth feels good, right? Norton's known for being acidic. This isn't offensive in any way.
No, it isn't at all.
And coming away from that Meiomi, this is fantastic.
Oh, I think you and I are a tad biased.
Well,
we've tried this, in all fairness, we've tried this wine before, and it's one of Jake and I's absolute favorites.
I think it's a fantastic example of not just Norton, but like Virginia wine, the creativity behind it. Jason would shrug it off. Say, oh, yeah, it's okay. No, it's fantastic. Yeah, the artistry is there.
Jason is one of those people who's authentic as a person and as a brand.
Mm-hmm. And his wines are authentic too. I think,
exactly.
He gave this one a cool name, which I believe means Bayuka Baba means grandfather or old man.
You know what? I'll look up on his website.
Yeah, so you work on that. I love that this is the same alcohol percentage as the Meiomi. This is bone dry, native fermented, in a clay amphora.
It's Turkish.
Turkish.
For grandfather. You're right.
It's Turkish for grandfather. Mm-hmm. So I know I tasted his 23 Norton. He didn't do the clay amphora again. I think he said he put the PV in it that year.
I'm so excited. I'll try whatever he puts in an amphora.
I'll just try anything he makes. So one thing I do want to call attention to is we're talking about like natural winemaking and stuff, but you'll notice that it says contains sulfites on the bottle. And I want to clear this up for consumers because this is something that we don't talk about or know about. All wines have sulfites in them. You fermentation as a byproduct produces a very tiny bit of sulfites. And it's mostly not damaging or helpful in any way. It usually blows off or gets absorbed by something and lost. Mm-hmm. We add sulfites, and we add sulfur specifically to the wines for a number of reasons. It refreshes the wine. It protects from microbial spoilage. We use it to, oh my gosh, it's escaping me, antioxidant. But it's kind of like we're using it as a shield to keep our wine safe. And it really allows us to make some mistakes with the management of the wines. And I think because we know this as winemakers, we tend to add way more sulfur. And I know Jason does use sulfur. He does use nutrients from what I understand. Yes, he uses nutrients. And he does use a couple of organic approved products, but he only does it to the benefit of the wine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
He's not doing it in any way to make the wine more tannic or less tannic or more acidic, less acidic. He's just trying to do what's best for the wine's health.
Okay.
I don't know. I think we should probably get him here and get him on this to talk about this.
I think so.
That's the way to go. What do you think of his brand and his bottle?
I mean, I said that Jason was authentic, and his label is gorgeous.
You know, to me, it screams ancestral.
Ancestral, yeah. But that kind of is rooted in his winemaking style as well.
And it's artistic.
Yes, and every wine he makes has some sort of word on it that has a deeper meaning.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good stuff going.
And on the very back of his label, on the back of his label, he has a vine close to a cliff. And I believe he said that this was excellence or great things come at the edge of disaster.
Oh, that sounds like Jason.
And because he's working and trying to make something in its most true form, I feel like you're flirting with disaster because you're not having all these things that would otherwise help you make the wine if you have a mistake or something environmentally happens. Right. So every time he makes a wine, he's flirting with disaster because of the natural things that could happen to impact the end result. From a brand perspective, it's consistent. It's beautiful. And
you would love to market that, wouldn't you?
I would.
So
Jason does a wonderful job marketing himself.
He does. I think the two takeaways here, right? On the topic of marketing, I know that he's mentioned that it's harder to move a wine like this without a lot of explanation. And it
requires a campaign.
It does. And
it's the same as the Norton Nouveau.
Right.
Where it required explanation.
Right. And once we explained it, we sold out.
Yeah.
But I know that this style of wine has finally got a huge following and it's got presence in the market. I get very excited about projects like this from any producer, not just Jason. I'm really interested in how he's doing it and getting away with it. But also, I think this is just what consumers are starting to imagine. This is what they imagine wine is. And then they go to the grocery store and they have Meiomi and they're not getting that.
Yeah.
Or they feel like this is what that is. And these things are not the same. They are different. The other thing to take away, I kind of talked about this before we started, is they're both screw caps.
The price point is also about the same.
Is it?
That one might be a little bit more.
A little bit more, but I would rather pay a little bit more.
If I'm paying $5 to $10 more, and I don't recall exactly what I paid, but I'm pretty sure it was like a $30, $35.
Yeah.
I would rather buy this. 100%.
And it's not even about supporting the local producer. Like if I tasted these wines side by side and I was going to choose one,
I would buy
the Norton. Even though one's a red blend and the other one's a varietal, like it's not about the varietal. It's not about who made the wine.
If this was a good red blend,
you would have a competition.
It would have competition. Yeah.
But I'm also interested in, maybe you can tell me more about this. Do consumers care in this? If you were to taste these side by sides and say this one has sugar, this one doesn't, is that going to be a deciding factor?
If you say the sugar component, yes.
Right. Do they care about if you say this one was manufactured in a facility, this one was made by one person and the other guy that helps him in the vineyard?
The question would then be, is there a drastic price difference? If there's a nominal price difference and I can get this one that supports local, the general consumer probably would gravitate towards this. However, if it's, a $60 bottle of wine versus a $30 bottle of wine, the way the economy is right now,
sure,
unfortunately, the the more locally produced would be edged out.
I don't know if you think so? Like, to me, I would rather it's not even about supporting local. If I got to taste these wines side by side.
If I got to taste them side by side, hands down, that one.
Like, I'm at the point in my life now where I don't drink Meiomi. I wouldn't even bother buying it. I'm not going to spend the money on this. I know how wine's made. I understand the price points and the costs and the marketing. I don't understand marketing. I don't know what you actually do, but it's amazing, whatever it is. And
do we need to have an episode where we just talk about what Jill does for a living?
What does Jill do for a day? We should do a day of Jill.
No. We should do a day in the life of each person and that be a social media campaign.
We should do that.
That's really popular. Get ready with me. I hate the get ready with me movement, but I feel like we also kind of have to feed into it. A day in the life of a wine marketer. What?
Let's do that for the grapes. Get ready before I'm picked.
We did that last year with the Norton Nouveau.
I don't remember.
We did the progression of the grapes.
Oh, that was awesome.
It was your idea.
I don't recall.
It was.
I'm old.
I just showed up with a camera. Well, we digress again. Welcome to Wine Fringe. Side quest.
We've got these two wines that are both screw caps, right?
Both about the same price point.
Both about the same price point. The Meiomi screw cap has a plastic liner, okay? And that plastic liner does not protect the wine over time, right? Okay. And I commented when we cracked it open, there was a little bit of like smoke or gas that came out, and you didn't believe me. You thought I was like,
I thought you were blowing smoke. Oh, look, the dad joke is on the other foot.
I usually do. That's probably some kind of sulfur gas that they spray in the bottle each time they put the screw cap on. Whereas Jason's screw cap, the Arterra Norton, has a tin capsule, or tin screw cap, sorry. So I've talked to Jason about this, and I had no idea that tin was better than the plastic liner. But if you got a tin screw cap, and I'm saying this, and this is true, this is not an opinion, a tin screw cap allows the red wine to age in bottle by completely keeping oxygen out. And it allows the wine to attenuate over time. And Jason's thing is using the screw cap so that you're buying a nice bottle of wine and you have the luxury of giving it time and seeing it develop. Whereas a cork will let oxygen in and out, and that can be the winemaker's decision to have that oxygen exchange over time to change the wine. Whereas Jason, because he's using less sulfur, he wants the wine to not spoil in any way. Whereas this Meiomi is probably not going to be good after a couple years. This wine will last for years to come because of that tin screw cap. My point being that obviously both of these wines, similar price points, screw caps. Meiomi recognizes that screw caps are better for consumers, and then Arterra's doing it because there's a purposeful reason, right?
He's so intentional in everything from start to finish.
But this is not going to deter marketing, right? This isn't going to stop consumers from buying a bottle of wine.
No, the screw top is going to make it more accessible for consumers.
So? Do you think that corks are going to go downhill going forward?
I think corks will always have a place.
Yeah. This is premium wine with a screw cap.
All the better.
Okay. So, what is the takeaway here? I think the takeaway here is that right now in the industry, chemicals are don't ask, don't tell. Because we don't have to tell you, and you're not going to ask because you don't know what to ask. You're never going to know.
Advocate for transparency.
Get with you can buy wine in a grocery store, that's fine. It can be fun. Just recognize what you're buying, right? You're probably getting something manipulated. But if you go to a bottle shop or you go to a local producer, you're probably not going to get anything overly manipulated. But also drink everything, try everything at least once, taste and spit if you have to. And learn the differences. Find a producer, ask them what they do. They're going to tell you. Mm-hmm. There's no secrets, but there are tons of just not telling people things.
All right.
Did you have a favorite wine tonight?
Yeah, Arterra, hands down.
Yeah, sorry, Meiomi, don't sue us.
Yeah, please don't. But Jason's work, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Right. Thanks for hanging out and listening to us.
Babylon.
Have a good night.